Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia. That, of course, is Kyle Yates, and it's you. And we're talking all things football today, and today's show is all about the mid-round value picks. Every idiot can get the first couple picks right. No. We want to go and find the values as the draft goes on. We talked last week, Yates and I did a really deep dive on some of those other players. We had ADPs in the 300s, baby, of some players we're talking about. So we want to bring it back a little bit. And Yates, today we're going to talk about the values in those rounds like 4 through 10, the guys that we like, the guys we target, the guys that sometimes might slip another round or so that probably shouldn't, but they should find their way onto your rosters.
Yeah, and just like every episode that we do at this point of year, like it's a crucial one, right? Because we're talking and preparing people for their fantasy football drafts. And like you mentioned, the first couple rounds are typically pretty easy. You can get the Christian McCaffrey pick right at the 101. But when you're on the clock in the 5th or the 6th, 7th round, that's where it starts to get to the point where it's like, okay, what has changed? If you're coming back to the table now, just tuning back into fantasy football, you might not know that a situation has changed for a player here in this in Houston or Indianapolis or Jacksonville, whatever. Like, you might not know what their situations have been and how it changes. So we want to walk you through that to get you ready for those middle portions of your draft. And then, of course, we've got sleepers and breakouts and all these other shows that are coming up here. Going to be a ton of fun.
And, of course, there's nobody better to talk about all of this with than somebody in the industry who is a dear friend of mine. I got to spend all Saturday afternoon drafting with him at the Flex Draft and then drinking with him all night the rest of the time. And we had a great time. It was so good to see him. And there's great analysts in this community. There's great fantasy players in this community. And then there's an overlap. I like to call them the elite, right? The elite. The guys who are the great analysts and the great in-season players, the great drafters, all that kind of comes around full circle. And when I think of those people, and I tell him this all the time, Adam Ronis is at the top of the list. You know him from Fantasy Alarm. Of course, you know him from SiriusXM Radio as well. Adam, I'm so happy to have you here on the show today, man, and thankful that you took the time to hang out. And of course, we fought each other all day Saturday for players, and it's just great to be back in that environment with you, my friend.
Yeah, no question about it. I appreciate the kind words. It was great to be back in person. There's nothing like having a draft in person. It's something we've been missing over the last couple of years. So to see so many faces that we haven't seen in the industry in such a long time, it was a great day on Saturday. And let's just hope that we can continue to do that.
Now, Adam and I are just going to touch on a few little points about theory because I think it's very important. We're going to get to all the names. We each got 5 mid-round value picks we're going to break down and talk about. But we're going to talk not about our teams and not about the draft and recap all that stuff because I don't care about my fantasy team as much as I care about yours, okay? That's my job. And same thing with Adam. So our job is to try to tell you just a little bit about theory of what went on in that draft and how it can help you. Before we do, I just want to tell you guys about what we got going on because if you want a draft assistant right there in the draft with you, like the draft intern almost, what you want is to go to fantasypros.com/draftwizard and get our draft assistant with Sync. What is it? You still don't know? I'm going to tell you what it is. It's like having one of us in the draft with you. Doesn't matter if you're on Yahoo, ESPN, NFL.com, CBS, any of the major sites, we got you. Our online draft software links up to that draft and will help you make your picks. It'll make suggestions, tell you what's on the board, what's remaining, give you pick predictions, all of this stuff. Like I said, we could all use some extra help. And we're giving that to you at Fantasy Pros. It is the most amazing tool. Tags even tells you. Tags uses it. If Tags uses it, he's like the walking draft assistant. That guy's using it, then you should be as well. Let me tell you right now. And also, keep in mind, this is for our MVP and Hall of Fame subscribers. Now, I understand you say, well, I don't know if I want to spend that much money this year on that and all this stuff. I got you too. Uncle Joey's got you. This is what you do. You go to fantasypros.com/offers. All you got to do is spend a $10 deposit on one of our partner sites. We're talking Underdog, FanDuel, DK. Enter a contest, and you get 6 free months of Hall of Fame subscription of our package at Fantasy Pros. That's a $65 value for just $10 somewhere else to go play and hang out. And there you go. You get your draft assistant just like that. See what I did there? Now, you write me a thank you card when we're all done, and we'll call it even. So go to fantasypros.com/draftwizard. Get that draft assistant with Sync and go to fantasypros.com/offers to get that $10 deposit. You do that on one of our sites there that we have connections with. And just like that, you get that Hall of Fame package, which gives you so much for your money. Let me tell you, $65 value for $10 for playing more fantasy. You're welcome. Right, Ronis, I want to talk to you about this. And Kyle, I want to get your thoughts as well. When we're in a draft, we always go in with a plan. When you're trying to have a plan, try to be flexible. I always say be those two things, right? Prepared and flexible for each one of your drafts. And Adam, for me in this Superflex draft, I know it's a sharky room. I know the people in this room are really tough. Everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody is willing to be aggressive on the players they like. And number one, you got to know the room. Number two, I know for me, I'm looking at this draft saying, okay, I'm in the 5th pick overall. I'd like to get one of the elite quarterbacks. I did. That's great. Then there were 2 other quarterbacks I wanted. If I get Lawrence, that'd be great. Well, he went 2 picks before me. Oh no. Okay, I'll get Burrow on the way back. Well, he went 2 picks before me on the other way, right? Oh, what do I do? Option 3, take Trey Lance early and then take another late QB like a Derek Carr, which is the guy that ended up being on my roster. That was my approach, and I want to highlight that because I feel like you need several approaches to be successful. When you were entering this Superflex Flex League draft, what was your approach? How did it unfold? And how did you pivot in the draft when things started going, into that higher level where we all know players start flying off the board that we like maybe sooner than we wish they would?
Yeah, since this is a super flex league, you really have to have an approach with the quarterbacks going in. And years past, I've been in this league for several years, I have waited on my quarterbacks, and it has actually worked out. Last year, it was a disaster. It did not work out. So I said, all right, I'm probably going to invest in a quarterback early. Picking number 9, I want to see what the teams in front of me do. In your home leagues, though, we know the quarterbacks are going to fly off the board. But I knew in this room they might be more patient. So when I got up at pick 9, there were 5 quarterbacks off the board. I decided to take Russell Wilson. And then I said I'm going to wait and see how the room plays it. And the quarterbacks started to slow down. I think there was only 2 in the second round. So I said, all right, I'm going to wait now. And just was waiting for the right moment to kind of step in. And then I saw it after I got, 3, 4 skill position players. And I took Tua as my number 2. I do like what you did with Lance and then getting Carr, because now if Lance is not the starter to begin the year, you just plug in Carr, knowing that at some point Lance is going to come in. So I kind of wanted to do that with Fields or Lance, but it didn't work out. And usually I don't take a third quarterback because it feels like everyone always takes one. But it got so late, I think it was round 15, and Teddy Bridgewater was there. So I took him because there's certainly a chance he could start. So I just think this board is going to be different in your home league because people emphasize the quarterbacks in Superflex leagues. You're going to see way more go in the first 2 or 3 rounds, but you never know. And that's the point, is you have to be flexible. So you can go in with a plan, but you always have to read the draft room. And I think that's the key, because I'm sure you guys get this too. Oh, should I start my draft RB? Should I go? No, you just can't do that. You can go in, like you said, go in with a blueprint, have an idea, this is what I want to do, but you have to look at the picks in front of you, because if 10 running backs go, you have to be open to taking that wide receiver. If they're going to let a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 fall in your lap, take it. If you know the player pool well, you will figure out every position.
It feels like Yates in Superflex this year, there's 2 approaches. You can go with those big-time quarterbacks, or you could start to hedge your bets a little bit with some of the younger guys. And I'll even throw Tua into that mix. So along with Lawrence, Burrow, Tua, Trey Lance, the aggression. I was so proud to show you that draft afterwards, Yates, because I know you'd be so happy that Lance ended up on that roster in a very responsible manner, mind you. But how do you feel about that approach this year, that, if all of a sudden you're in a spot where those elite quarterbacks don't make it to you, getting your running backs, getting your wide receivers, and then pivoting off of that and saying, okay, let me get some of this young talent and then back it up with some of the veteran talent? Do you think that's a viable approach, or are you still, you know what, get a Russell Wilson, make sure you get an Aaron Rodgers, somebody that you can call a true QB1?
Again, it's all dependent upon the league and what happens in front of you. So like Adam said, where if you have some of the quarterbacks don't go off the board that quickly, right, then you don't have to have this need and this rush to then draft your QB1 or your QB2. You can kind of play it out as it goes along. And that's why drafting in the middle of your draft or towards the end is kind of preferable versus at the turns, because then you have to set the trends versus being able to draft in the middle where you can let the trends fall to you. So I think definitely I'm always in favor of grabbing a Russell Wilson or a Kyler Murray or Dak Prescott super early on in a Superflex league, and then seeing what happens in rounds 2, 3.
Right.
If the quarterbacks aren't flying off the board and I still know that I can get a very valuable fantasy quarterback in rounds 4 or 5, then that's the situation that I'll just load up on running back. I'll load up on wide receiver early. So again, it is just kind of playing the draft as it comes to you. It's very difficult when we get those types of questions, and you alluded to it, Adam, like running back early. Sure, I'm not opposed to the strategy, but it's all dependent upon who's there.
All right, and it's ironically, Yates, Russell Wilson on Adam's team, Kyler Murray on mine. So great minds must all think alike, right? Get those guys that you kind of trust, and then you have options and be prepared, as Yates and Ronis are saying, to be flexible with those options. And I like talking a little bit of theory here at the top of the show, because when you have great fantasy minds to talk about this, and people always break down drafts the same way. They look at all the teams. Well, which team do you like? Well, it's like, no. That's not really helping anybody so much as why did this team unfold the way it has. You can go over to Flex Leagues and check that out too. Jake runs great stuff over there. Jake Seeley, of course, friend of the show. Always does a great job running that league. Great to see everybody. I want to see Yates in that draft next year. We're going to get you out to New York. Take you out there. Ronis and I show you the town. Now we're talking. Yeah, look at that look. He is both excited and terrified, and that's why you subscribe to Fantasy Pros on YouTube, so you can see all the feels that Yates is having right now. Let's talk about the mid-round values. Adam, you are our guest, so give me somebody right now on your list that you think is a great mid-round pick, mid-round value for where he's being drafted.
Yeah, for me, it's Tyler Lockett. I think the hate has gotten too far. I know if you look at last year and you break it down, he's so inconsistent. He had one game of 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. But that whole Seattle offense tailed off in the second half, and I think he fell into that. He was also banged up. He's been banged up actually the last 2 years and played through it. This guy has played 16 games every year except one. So I always say this. People will criticize players. This guy doesn't play through anything. He's not tough. Then when the guy plays through the injuries, yes, the stats might suffer. People still complain. But the bottom line is, we know where the ball is going in this offense. It's DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And you have to think they're going to pass a little bit more. They changed offensive coordinators. Russell Wilson was upset in the offseason. You need to please that guy. And we saw this offense in the first half. Russell Wilson was in the MVP conversation, if not the leading candidate, the first half of the season. What has Tyler Lockett done the last 3 years? At least 8 touchdowns in 3 straight years. Double-digit touchdowns in 2 of the last 3. 100 catches last year. 1,054 yards. I just don't understand why this guy's going in the 5th, 6th round. He has moved up in some competitive leagues to the 4th round. And I always say this, if I talk and say something, I do it. I took Tyler Lockett in the Superflex draft. And I actually have a lot of Tyler Lockett so far. Yes, best ball, he's more appealing. We could say that about almost every player. But if you look at Tyler Lockett's numbers and DK Metcalf's, they're not that far off. I don't think there should be a 3-round gap in those two. And yes, DK Metcalf's a more talented player, bigger wide receiver. Maybe we haven't seen his ceiling yet. But Tyler Lockett's been pretty reliable. 5th round, you can get him maybe as your wide receiver 3. I'm all in.
The game log from last year, I think, has really seeped into people, and I think it's almost becoming an overreaction in a way. I mean, it's good to react off of it. It's good to understand where DK Metcalf is now in the pecking order, but I think maybe it's getting a little bit too far. I'm with you. I've seen him going way later in drafts. Maybe he should. I think he went pretty late in this one too, right? Where you ended up picking him up. So, look, at the end of the day, I think it's a good value. Yates, give me a value for you. Tyler Lockett, 56 overall there in the ADP and half PPR. But I see you've got Darrell Henderson on your list first to talk about today.
It's really interesting, Joe. You know, we talked about Traquan Smith, and after the Michael Thomas injury news, we thought that we were going to see his ADP skyrocket. And I thought that was going to be the exact same thing for Darrell Henderson after Cam Akers. And it's settled. It's settled here at RB21 in ECR, which stands for Expert Consensus Ranking, which we do over at FantasyPros.com. And then RB25 in ADP. So Darrell Henderson, I think that the general public here has written off Henderson, and we saw that in Dynasty Leagues, which led me to say, don't forget about Darrell Henderson this entire offseason, because I think that he's still going to be involved in this offense. We need to remember, Darrell Henderson is a very, very good running back. Mm-hmm. Henderson ranked within the top 10 of PFF offensive. I have like a fruit fly all around me right now, and it is driving me batty. This is insane. Okay. Henderson.
Once again, this is why you subscribe and you watch the podcast.
As you watch me going like this. Oh, my goodness. All right. Let me try that again.
By
Henderson
the way,
ranked
I hope
within
everybody
the top
is screenshotting that, too. They're screenshotting Yates going like this, trying to knock away things. Go ahead. Tell me more about Darrell Henderson.
All right.
There's a fly on the wall.
Ranked within the top 10 of PFF offensive grades last season at the running back position with a threshold of 100 and more rush attempts. He was top 10 graded out by PFF at the running back position, beating out some very, very talented names here. Akers had 145 rush attempts in 2020. Henderson had 138. So we're looking at a very, very similar sample size. Henderson had a better yards per carry. He had more rushing touchdowns, more avoided tackles, less fumbles, more routes run, the fruit flies back, more targets, more receptions, more receiving yards, and had 30 attempts in the red zone last year to Akers' 7. So when we look at Darrell Henderson, we have like completely written him off because of what happened at the end of last year. And I get it. Like, it's all about volume and opportunity in fantasy football. So while a player may be extremely talented, it doesn't mean anything if they're not getting the ball. And that's what we saw with Cam Akers, was that he just completely dominated the carry share last year over the last 4 or 5 games, right? Mm-hmm. And Henderson just completely faded into oblivion. But now he's got the opportunity in this offense. You're looking at Raymond Calais, Xavier Jones, and Jake Funk behind him on this depth chart. It's Darrell Henderson's job. And we know that he is an extremely talented running back. Everything is poised here for Darrell Henderson to return top 15 value at the running back position, and he's being drafted at RB25. So I've got him at RB15 in my rankings, which is a big gap to go from RB21 in ECR and 25 in ADP. Give me all the Darrell Henderson in the mid-rounds this year.
I have to tell you, Yates, fruit flies aside, I'm shocked about the fact he hasn't risen higher. I would have thought, like, in that initial moment there that people were going to overreact, and I thought it was going to be to a place where, oh my God, I don't even want to get into it. And here we are a couple weeks later, and Henderson's basically settled into this, like, yeah, it's okay, it's like a low-end RB2, and all right, well, that's fine, but it seems like there's at least potential there for more, and I'm just honestly surprised that it hasn't gone that way. Now, maybe people are waiting for another shoe to drop, maybe they think they're going to add another running back, and if they do, they don't want to be caught in that scenario, so I can understand that. But as the weeks go by, that scenario is going to become more and more unlikely, I think, potentially. So keep an eye on that situation as it unfolds. Before I give you my first pick, I want to tell you about a sponsor of today's show, and that is Magic Spoon. Oh, it is magical. It's not just for breakfast, okay? I know all of you are so busy sometimes. You're running around, you forget to eat, you got to grab something quick, and then hop on your next podcast. I know how it is out there. Everybody knows. You're going from podcast to podcast or job to job or moment to moment, or the kids need you or this or that, and you need to eat something, and you want to put something good inside your body. That's what Magic Spoon is for, okay? It's got 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, only 4 net grams of carbs, which is good because Yates is always watching his carbs. He's very careful about that. Only 140 calories in each serving. It's keto-free, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, but not taste-free. It's delicious, it's low carb, it's all these things, and you can build your own variety box just by going out there, and they've got all kinds of flavors like cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, blueberry, and cinnamon. I don't know if I'd buy blueberry flavored anything, but I hear it's delicious anyway. And good news, backed by popular demand, and now here forever, because everybody loves it so much, is the cookies and cream and the maple waffle. They're permanent, and I just got a box of both, and I can tell you, the cookies and cream, delicious. So go to magicspoon.com/fantasypros. Again, that's magicspoon.com/fantasypros to grab your delicious cereal and try it today. And be sure to use that code fantasypros when you do. You check out, you save $5 off your order. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. It's delicious. It's good for you. It's the Magic Spoon. What else is good for you is mid-round values. And the guy I want to talk about first is Robby Anderson. Now, I made my list before Adam made his, and I know he's on both of our lists because, once again, Adam and I always fight over the same players every single draft, every single year. And for me, Adam, I'm going to more set you up for this one because 136 targets last year, only 3 TDs. And we look at Robert Woods and we say, oh, he's got a lot of target volume, but the touchdowns, oh, that'll come back. That'll be fine. And I'm not saying Sam Darnold is Matthew Stafford. That's obviously not the case. But I feel like there's some more upside this year potentially for some touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey being back changes the dynamic of this offense in a great manner. And I don't want to put too much stock in the familiarity between Darnold and Robby Anderson. But Adam, when I look at Robby Anderson, I think he's in a position this year to be equally, if not more, successful. But you look at the value, he is 88 overall in ADP, wide receiver 35, and that's just a tremendous value in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I had him on the list as well. Look, he left the Jets, and look what happened. I mean, he had his best year of his career. We know how that works out. And like you said with Darnold, here's the thing with Darnold. I don't think we know yet. He has sucked, obviously, right? But look at the situation he was in with Adam Gase and the Jets, no talent around him. He might suck. I think we're going to find out this year. But he's got a lot of weapons, a good offense that turned it around last year. Teddy Bridgewater was very conservative. They really weren't good in the red zone, so you could see some more touchdowns. They'll have Christian McCaffrey back. But we've seen Robby Anderson flash throughout his career. He has a season high of 7 touchdowns back in 2017, and he is familiar with Darnold. So I just think that he can come close to what he did last year if he's getting those targets. And, DJ Moore is going to get his. They don't have the tight end. Christian McCaffrey obviously is going to get a lot of passes, but they did throw to the running back slot last year. So even if the targets go down a little bit, you could see some more touchdowns and also maybe some more big plays. The most alarming or surprising thing last year for me was like DJ Moore and Robby Anderson kind of reversed roles. Robby Anderson only averaged 11.5 yards per reception. We know him more as a big play guy, 14, 15 yards per reception. So maybe with Darnold's arm, that opens it up and helps kind of alleviate if the targets go down.
Adam, I'm always looking for guys that like are the 80-90% version of somebody who maybe is going much higher. And I keep going back to Woods because that's a guy who's like a fringe wide receiver 1, wide receiver 17, and then literally double that value is Robby Anderson. I'm looking at the numbers, I'm looking at the situation, I'm like, well, I mean, obviously the downside of Woods is maybe he doesn't get a lot of touchdowns this year either, and he looks a lot more like Robby Anderson, but I can get Robby Anderson at wide receiver 35, and to me, that's value. That just rings value to me. Is that kind of the same feeling you get? It's almost like the dollar store version, if you will, and no offense to Robby Anderson, but it's significantly cheaper. It's literally like 2 times in terms of ADP.
I do like Robert Woods, though, so don't.
So do I.
Don't be crushing Robert Woods.
I'm not crushing Robert Woods. Yates will get very mad at me. He'll send the fruit fly over to my house if that happens. Believe
Which I think
me.
I killed it, by the way.
Oh, that's
killed
good.
Nice job.
So,
Do you feel like a man now? You feel strong?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Good. so, but you know what I mean? It's in terms of what you can get and where that ADP is. And if you want to get running back early, you might have to pass on a guy like Robert Woods, but maybe you can get most of that value back in a pick like Robby Anderson.
Yeah, there's a tier of wide receivers where they're all kind of ranked close, probably rounds 3 to 6. Like there's a group where there are times I'm not sure who to go with because they're so closely ranked. I think the difference with Robert Woods is people see him as more reliable, and also Matthew Stafford coming in as quarterback, they think like it could prove even more. With Robby Anderson, we don't have as an extensive track record, and there's a lot of people that still doubt Darnold, and I think that's why you're seeing him fall. But we've seen the upside with Robby Anderson a couple of times. Again, it just hasn't been consistent. So I think that's why you're seeing Anderson go a little bit further. I think they doubt Darnold. People will do that. They'll look at the receiver, who's the quarterback, and that's true to some extent. But Darnold has worked with Robby Anderson, and I truly believe we don't know the answer on Sam Darnold yet. I mean, anyone who says they know for sure, how can you say that?
You can't, especially after watching Tannehill blossom. And Tannehill had incremental progress when he was with the Dolphins. It just wasn't seen because the play calling was so bad and the offensive structure was so bad. Yates, next guy on your list, one of my favorites. He's on this flex roster I drafted on Saturday. He's my 3rd running back, and I keep getting him as my 3rd running back, my flex guy, and I'm so thrilled with it. He's a great value now. I hope it doesn't change, but tell me more about Travis Etienne.
Yeah, and Travis Etienne down at RB27 in ADP, I think a large portion of this is because of James Robinson's presence here on this depth chart, and that people are still buying into, people are still buying into James Robinson and believing in what he did last year. And I get that to an extent, but we can't forget about who Travis Etienne is and what he brings to the table. 1st round pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 2021 NFL Draft. Here's the thing. We know that he's got blazing speed, and he can break away some big plays. He's going to be electric to watch in the preseason, and I'm really thinking that as soon as we see him break away a big play in the preseason, we're going to see his ADP skyrocket. But the other part of his game is that he's seen his reception totals rise from only 12 in 2018 to 37 in 2019, and then to 48 receptions in 2020 in only 12 games, which 48 receptions for a college football running back is a crazy amount. And now you have his quarterback from Clemson also as the quarterback here in Jacksonville. They're going to be utilizing him and James Robinson. I think they're going to see a lot of 2 running back sets, but they're going to be utilizing Travis Etienne heavily as a receiver out of the backfield and even motioning him out into the slot and things like that. I think he's going to have this Alvin Kamara light type role. So when you look at his blazing speed, the home run threat that he brings to the table, his guaranteed target volume that I think he's going to be walking into, RB25 in ECR, 27 in ADP. I've got him at 17 in my rankings because I think that I don't know if I want to necessarily draft him as an RB2. I think you can, but to get him as an RB3 on your roster is an absolute steal.
Yeah, and honestly, Yates, that's where I'm getting him, which is tremendous. It makes me so happy. Another player found his way onto my roster. Of course, I made my list, and then Adam sends me his list, and wouldn't you know it, another overlap guy. It's the last time we're going to overlap, but when I think more than one analyst tells you something, it's worth kind of listening, putting your ear up a little bit, and hearing some more about Jerry Jeudy. I know, he caught only 52 of 113 targets last year. I get that. You know who also struggled with drops early in their career? Jerry Rice. Tony Gonzalez. Some of the greatest football players we have ever seen in this league have struggled with drops early in their career. Now, I'm not saying Jerry Jeudy is Jerry Rice, just because their name is Jerry. What I am saying is that we have to give talent a little bit more time, hopefully some improved quarterback play, and I know improved quarterback play from Drew Lock to Teddy Bridgewater might be incremental, but I still think it might be an improvement. So at the end of the day, I think Jerry Jeudy in year 2, with hopefully a healthy Cortland Sutton on the other side of him, really does open up his confidence, gets him to a different level. I don't want to crush the guy right now because of the drops. I want to give him a little bit more time to turn it around. And at wide receiver 36, to me, he's the perfect gamble to take, and I think the perfect value. Ronis, why did Jeudy make your list?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the similar things that you said. This guy is so good. I mean, if you watch his route run, he's one of the best route runners in the NFL. It was just a bad situation last year. I don't know if you remember, too, he tweeted something out that was kind of negative and then deleted it. Something like, yeah, I'm just running out there wide open and just getting in cardio. And obviously, with social media now, these players do tweet things and then realize, all right, we know, we think it. We know, we're watching the games. We see the same thing. He was open so much, and Drew Lock just didn't see him. So the talent is there. People are looking at last year's stats. They're meaningless to me. They really just don't mean much. I mean, this guy's so talented, and not every wide receiver comes into the league and does what Justin Jefferson does. You know, that's rare. So you have to understand that players tend to struggle before they get better. And we saw that with Jeudy last year. It just was a situation that was awful. And it would probably be better if Teddy Bridgewater started for him. He's more accurate. He won't take chances. He'll get the ball to him. So if Drew Lock wins this competition, it hopefully means that he did show some improvement. And I do think, too, Sutton on the other side obviously commands some attention. But I'm banking on talent here with Jerry Jeudy. I mean, the guy just can get open so easily. So if the quarterback can see that and get him the ball, I think he's going to produce. And you're getting him at a cheaper price because of last year's struggles.
I think you nailed it. We're wagering on the talent here, not the rookie performance. And I think if you're making fantasy football investments, that's a smart thing to do, especially at the value you're getting him. Speaking of value, there's more values to be had here. You've got another running back next on your list here, Yates, that I know you're very high on, and still RB35. Man, that sounds like a pretty good value to me.
We're starting to see his ADP uptick here as as training camp moves along, and as we move into the preseason, we're starting to see Michael Carter tick up boards here. And with Michael Carter here for the New York Jets, we don't have a ton of stats to be able to fall back on in an argument, right? But when you're looking at the main things that we look at for fantasy football are they a talented player? And the answer with Michael Carter is, when you watch his film, it's a resounding yes. He's a very, very talented player. Does he have the opportunity in front of him? That are the two main things that we look for in fantasy football, are talent and opportunity. If you've got those two things, you're going to be on my radar. And with the opportunity here for Michael Carter, he's got an often injured Tevin Coleman above him on the depth chart and LaMichael Pirine. Those are the only two players that are standing in his way from having a sizable workload. Now, with Michael Carter, it does come with a caveat saying that because of the offensive structure, he's not going to get 20 carries per game. He doesn't have, I think, top 12 upside in this offense because of the volume that he's going to get, but he is absolutely going to return value on where you're drafting him. You might have to wait a game or two for Tevin Coleman to move out of the picture, but everything out of training camp is saying that Michael Carter is going to be the 1A in this backfield really, really soon. And so I want to get ahead of everyone else in my league to say I'm going to draft Michael Carter, especially when I'm looking for running back depth. And the players that are going around him, like Leonard Fournette, David Johnson's going right in front of him. Like, no, I don't want to draft either of those players. I'll take Michael Carter there because of the opportunity that he has in front of him, because of the talent, and I think that he's going to be really, really good for fantasy this year. So I've got him at RB 25 or 26 in my rankings off the top of my head. I really like Michael Carter this year.
Yeah, it's very smart of you to recognize the cap there, but what is the upside for Michael Carter? Like, in your opinion, like if everything does break right, let's give Jet fans a little glimmer of hope for a moment here, because I know, everyone's used to me being negative on the Jets, so Adam took my role today in that. So tell me, like, where do you see, if everything breaks right and this Jets offense is maybe better than we think, what is the upside finish for Michael Carter?
I think he can push for top 15 because of his work as a receiver. Wow. But I don't think that he can get much higher than that. And that's assuming that the offense is going to be put in the red zone frequently, giving scoring opportunities. I'm not banking that into my projections here. So even with projections, which is determining the most likely outcome, I've still got Michael Carter where I've got him at RB 25, 26. So I think that he does have some upside, but again, it's putting a cap on it because of the offensive structure that they're going to cycle in multiple running backs here. That is the concern, but I do think Michael Carter is going to be the main guy in this backfield sooner than later.
All right, next guy on my list, my third guy, is going 92 overall, quarterback 12. I don't know why he's going at quarterback 12, because I think he's been better than that, and just nobody seems to care or notice. They all say, well, Derrick Henry is the offense. But you know what? Ryan Tannehill kind of scores a lot of fantasy points last time I checked. 40 combined touchdowns last year. I think he can do that again this year quite easily. You added Julio Jones to replace the vacancy left over there by Corey Davis leaving and Jonnu Smith leaving town. I think he could easily cross 4,000 yards this year with that 17th game. And I got to tell you, I'm looking at Ryan Tannehill, and you're going to give me him as the last of the QB1s. That makes me want to wait in single quarterback leagues if that's going to be the case. In fact, I might be a little bit more aggressive just to make sure that doesn't happen. Take him a round or two early because I think he's worth that. Before we get to your next guy, Ronis, I want to get your take on Tannehill. Not just in a single QB, but also in Superflex. I feel like probably one of the more underrated assets, and people get scared off because of Derrick Henry, and I want to kind of shake the dust off of that. Derrick Henry is great, but he is not the only guy that's scoring fantasy points in this offense, and Ryan Tannehill keeps coming up with big game after big game, and pretty darn consistent when you start to look at the game log.
I love him. I'm not sure if it's because people say, oh, he's so efficient, he can't do that again. I mean, it is amazing. He only had 481 pass attempts last year. But, first of all, I think that's going to change. Remember,
I do too.
Offensive coordinator's gone, right? Their defense is terrible. They bring in Julio Jones. What does that tell you? They're going to pass more. They have to by default. I mean, yeah, of course they want to keep feeding Derrick Henry. Why wouldn't you? But he has shown the ability to still put up excellent fantasy numbers while Derrick Henry gets carries. But I just think they're going to be in a position where their defense is so bad, they're going to have to pass more. The volume's going to go up. So even if he's not as efficient, he's still going to be good. And with A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, as long as he stays healthy, I know they don't have a lot of depth at wide receiver. That's going to be the key. If one of those guys goes down, they're really thin. But yeah, I'm going to take Ryan Tannehill in that range. He's done it 2 years in a row, and I think the volume goes up. So even if the efficiency goes down a little bit, I think it should offset.
All right, let's talk about another guy on your list here, Ronis, and it's Antonio Brown, a player that I feel like we're starting to bring back to life. I feel like every season there's like a player or two that we're kind of like rejuvenated with, and maybe we just need a little time off. Maybe we needed to get a little distance from some of the madness that was surrounding him. But last year, things started to click a little bit. Now in camp, in there with everybody. How do you feel about Antonio Brown and his value this year, where he's going?
I think he's going way too low, and I don't understand it. Trust me, I love Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I've taken Chris Godwin in drafts, but if you look from week 9 of the Super Bowl, the disparity between these guys wasn't that much. In fact, he led them in receptions from week 9 of the Super Bowl with 45. The other two had 40. Brown had the least amount of yards, obviously. Evans had 633, Godwin 561, Brown at 483. And the touchdowns were 6 for Evans, 5 for Godwin, 4 for Antonio Brown. Yards per target, Evans and Godwin were over 9. Brown was a shade under 8. The point is, they all produced, and it wasn't that far off. Tom Brady wanted Antonio Brown. This guy can still play. He gets open. This offense is going to put up big numbers again. Why would we think anything's going to change? They have all their starters back. It took Tom Brady some time to really get acclimated. If you look at that first half, it wasn't great. Once they clicked, they went off. They went off in the Super Bowl. Look, at some point, Tom Brady's going to slow down, right?
I don't know, man. I've been hearing that for a decade now. I'm not done with that.
What did Peyton Manning say in 2035? Brady's going to be here. So, it's feasible. It's possible. But until I see it, look, this offense is loaded. And again, I just don't think Antonio Brown should be going this far down. And I'm going to scoop him up.
Someday, Tom Brady will just stop playing. The slow down part, that's the part that I have a hard time kind of building my mind around. We've been talking so much, Yates, lately about Godwin and Evans being back-to-back in ADP and making that choice. And then there's Antonio Brown floating around rounds later, like rounds with an S at the end of it. Is there a part of you that goes, well, I'd rather just take Antonio Brown rounds later than try to make a decision between Godwin and Evans?
I'm getting pretty nervous about this, actually, over the past week or
Wait,
so.
which part?
About Evans. Well, I've been nervous about Evans' ADP and ranking the entire offseason, but it was Godwin. I was much higher on Godwin. I'm now getting pretty concerned with where Godwin are and where Godwin and Evans are in drafts right now because of Antonio Brown. I don't think that I went into projections in May or June when I started them with the right mindset that Antonio Brown is a huge portion of this offense, and I wasn't building that in enough. So, yeah, the closer that we get to the start of the NFL season, I'm starting to get a little nervous, and I'm starting to back down on Chris Godwin and Mike Evans at their current. I think Godwin is still fine because his ADP is a little bit more depressed than it is with Evans, but man, AB, I think that we're overlooking him.
I think we are too, and it's getting to a point where I think I would rather make that pivot. Just the way we talked about that Robert Woods. I love Robert Woods, but I don't seem to get him because that's where I'm looking at like the Travis Etiennes of the world and things like that's that spot where I'm reaching for certain guys that I really think can just blow up. And then I'm looking at, okay, how do I make up that deficit? It's the Robby Andersons. If I can't get Godwin or can't get Evans, maybe I pivot around and I say, well, get Antonio Brown, and maybe he has just as much share as everybody else, but it costs me a lot less to find out. That's what this whole show is about. That's what we're trying to do for you. Robert Tonyan, next on your list, number 4. Let's get yours in here. Tight end 13, which is practically free.
It's crazy, man. So I was going to lead off with the question of what would you say if I told you that a player that finished as the tight end 3 last season is now being drafted outside the top 12? Well, your immediate response would be like, okay, well, something drastic has changed, right? Something has changed with that player's situation, except that's not the situation or case at all. That we've still got Robert Tonyan here with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. And with Robert Tonyan, he was actually the tight end 1 last season at one point. So I don't understand why we have moved so far off of Robert Tonyan now to move him outside the top 12. Now, he had a ridiculously high catch rate last year. He had a ridiculously high touchdown rate last year. But again, this is Aaron Rodgers that we were talking about as his quarterback. If it was another quarterback, I would probably be saying like, yeah, that number is going to come down. And I am projecting that it's going to come down a bit. But to the point where he's going to fall outside the top 12, I can't get there. So Robert Tonyan here, again, tight end 10 in ECR, tight end 13 in ADP. That's an extreme value. If you are wanting to grab the tight end in the middle rounds, I'm not going to grab a Mark Andrews. I'm not going to grab TJ Hawkinson. I'll wait a couple rounds, and I'll grab Robert Tonyan.
I agree, man. It's that middle, I think, that kills you. I understand drafting the separators. I understand Kelsey, Waller, Kittle. I get all that. Pitts, I kind of understand in the right spot, too, especially on roster construction. I get wanting to take a chance. What I don't understand is that Andrews, Dallas Goedert, Hawkinson, that group kind of scares me a little bit, especially because then I'm passing on the Jeudys, the Robby Andersons, the Antonio Browns, all the guys that we're talking about, right? It's kind of a weird spot, so I'm with you 100%. Give me the late tight ends. There's plenty of shots to take. Another shot that I want to take is Trey Sermon, RB 38.5 PPR right now, ADP-wise, 96 overall, just around 100 players, right? Trey Sermon's right there. The question is, can he get 15 touches a week? I think he can get 12 to 15. I think he can straight out of the gate. And I think there's even opportunity for more as time goes on, potentially. And this is about potential. It's about value. It's also about youth at the position. And, rather than take shots on older running backs later, I think we've seen enough of that in the last couple of years to really be concerned with how that ends up most of the time. It's a young man's position. Trey Sermon's in a position where you hear a lot of good buzz about him in camp. To me, Trey Sermon is a player that I think you get aggressive on right now. RB 38. He's a guy that's not even going to be your, basically your RB 3, maybe a flex position in a deeper league. But I think Trey Sermon has a lot of upside. And Yates, you're Mr. Dynasty. To me, this is another value on the board that it keeps staying as a value, and I'm kind of surprised. I know it's ticked up a little bit, but it's just kind of crossed the threshold into that top 100, and I don't know if it's going to push much more barring a huge preseason game. What are your thoughts on Sermon?
Yeah, for sure, and it's a common theme here is, right, with 2 of my guys that I brought to the table, they're both rookie running backs, and that is the biggest discount that we're going to find on these players probably throughout their entire career. I mean, with Travis Etienne, I would not be shocked if he's being drafted as a top 15 running back next year. Michael Carter, maybe a top 20 running back next year. With Trey Sermon, I think because there's talk that he's going to take over this backfield, and Raheem Mostert will be the change of pace guy. And if that is the case, then I wouldn't be shocked if we're drafting Trey Sermon as a top 24 running back next year, because this offense is going to be that good. So, man, there's a lot here with Sermon to signal that he can handle a significant workload for this offense, and an offense that I think is about to be pretty damn good.
All right, we've got one name each left to go. Tags isn't here today, so I guess somebody has to talk about Mike Williams. So go ahead, Adam Ronis. I mean, we can't go a show without talking about him, but probably with good reason, right? This is a player that has touchdown upside. We saw a young quarterback emerge and look pretty darn elite in his first year in the NFL. So your thoughts on Mike Williams, the health, the upside, and the value that he presents at 125 overall?
Yeah, I tend not to be patient with women, and I kind of let them go too soon. With fantasy players, sometimes I'm real patient, and I'm a big Mike Williams guy, man. Just loved him coming out of Clemson. He's so talented, and we've been teased, right? He had the 10 touchdown season his second year, then he had a 1,000-yard season. He's been banged up. Last year was okay. We know he's a big play threat, but I just think new offense here, because I've always loved the Chargers. They've been a team that's just ruined me, but I think with the changes in the coaching staff and Joe Lombardi coming in as offensive coordinator, and this is not even him saying, well, Mike Williams is going to play the X role, which Michael Thomas did with the Saints. That's not even that. But you look at this offense and where the ball's going, Keenan Allen's going to get a lot, but I just think Mike Williams is finally going to be more consistent. We just haven't seen it yet, and he's a big play threat, and I just think this offense is going to be good. We saw Herbert really come in and play very well, and just love the talent with Mike Williams. And look where you're getting him. It's not like you're paying a big cost. You can get him as your wide receiver 5. If it doesn't work out, it's not going to crush you, but I just think the talent is there, and this is the year that maybe he could finally combine the yards and the touchdowns together.
Well, hopefully, Adam, it's also the year where you start to open up and be a little bit more vulnerable and be a little bit more patient when it comes to love. Please, I just want you to settle down and meet a nice girl after all these years. All right, let's get to Yates' next name on here on his list, and it's another good one. It's another one we've talked quite a bit. Once again, I see this name round to round, draft to draft being very different in terms of how it's valued. This is one that is fascinating because I feel like there's people who love Jaylen Waddle and people who are still a little concerned about how good he can be in this offense. And of all the names we've talked about, the biggest fluctuation I've seen so far in actual drafts is his. This is the guy that sometimes goes way earlier than I thought or way later than I thought, depending on who's in that room with you. So Yates, if we're in the room with you, how do you feel about Jaylen Waddle at going as wide receiver 45?
Oh, man, I'm getting him onto my rosters. I think that a lot of people are looking at this Miami Dolphins offense, and they're viewing it through what we saw, the lens of what we saw last year with Chan Gailey as the offensive coordinator, where Tua Tagovailoa was primarily operating on screens and slants. He was not really able to open up the offense, and so I think that people are taking that perception of Tua into this year versus what we've seen on his tape at Alabama. And what we're seeing now throughout camp is that Jaylen Waddle is being a force to be reckoned with throughout every level of the field, with his speed, with his ability after the catch, and Tua is lighting it up. So I think with this year, you are getting a extreme value on Jaylen Waddle. And I said earlier on in this offseason and in a video that we did for the YouTube channel, and I said that, I would not be shocked. Well, I would be shocked, but I would not be surprised if Jaylen Waddle puts up the kind of numbers and comes out with the kind of perception that Justin Jefferson did in his rookie season, because he is that incredible of a talent. Now, I'm not predicting or projecting what the 1,400 yards or whatever that Justin Jefferson put up last year, but I wouldn't be shocked if he comes close to it, and if you can get that at wide receiver 45 in ADP, there is no downside whatsoever to Jaylen Waddle at this price point.
All right, look, I'm with you, man. I like the talent. I love the ADP. It's funny to see it be so different draft to draft, but I feel like if you're playing in more of the casual style leagues, that Waddle's going to be a value for you on the board, and keep that in mind. Now, if you're playing in competitive ones, understand there might be somebody to reach. If it goes a little too far, you might want to let it go, but if it goes somewhere near where Yates is talking about, it's a really good value. All right, last one for me. Will Fuller, another guy who's been ended up on my teams lately. I understand he's going to miss a game for a suspension. I understand he's not playing with Deshaun Watson. I get all that. So we're going to wrap things up here with not one, but 2 Miami wide receivers. If you asked me this is how the show would end when we started, I would have probably said you're crazy. But here we are. Crazy times here in 2021. He is wide receiver 38, 102 overall. This is all about upside to me. This is about the upside, the scoring potential he brings, the big game potential he brings. And if indeed we can get a little bit more vertical. I do not trust Devontae Parker's health. I don't trust a lot of the other wide receivers. And look, Waddle, I love the talent, but he is still a rookie. So I look at Will Fuller as a player on a 1-year deal. And I always love those players on 1-year deals, man, where they gotta show up, ball out, and get paid. Because at the end of the day, this is kind of Will Fuller's fork in the road for his career. He had a great season last year up until that suspension where it all came crashing down. He was a risk I was taking late last year in a few leagues, and I was loving the returns. Adam, what's your take on Will Fuller this season? Are you somebody in the right roster construction where Will Fuller is a bonus, makes a lot of sense? Or are you worried about historically the injuries and the lack of, I guess, consistency outside of really catching those touchdowns, even though last year he was on pace for a 1,000-yard season pretty easily?
Yeah, I was on Will Fuller last year. He was so cheap. I'm like, you've got to take him. You're a talented guy, was falling due to injuries. I think the concern people have this year is him leaving Deshaun Watson, and there's a lot of targets in this offense. He's not a target for me, but like you said, in the right roster construction, I'll give you a perfect example. You guys were talking earlier about Robinson in Jacksonville. He's not a target for me, but in our flex draft, he fell to RB35. So I'm going to take him, and he might start the year, use him early if I have to, and then if his role diminishes, I'll replace him. So there's always a right price for someone. So I have not taken Fuller in any draft, just because I think in that range, there's so many receivers that, the Judys that we've discussed, Antonio Brown, I'm on those guys more. But in the right situation where maybe all those guys are gone, I would take Fuller because the talent is there. I think people might also think, oh, well, he finally stayed healthy because he took PEDs last year, right? I mean, that's what an automatic assumption people will make. But I think in the right spot, I'm willing to take him. He just hasn't been a target for me. He just hasn't landed on my teams.
Now, this is a player I've seen, actually, who falls a lot further than the consensus, a lot further than the ADP, because people go, Will Fuller, maybe I don't want to pay that much. And I see that he goes another round, and that's why I've been ending up with him lately, because it feels like he just falls to a point where it just makes sense to go ahead and take that risk again as the bonus wide receiver. I've got him as a wide receiver 5 on a ton of teams, just because, you know what, that's a pretty good value as a wide receiver 5 in terms of talent. There's not a lot of guys that can match also what he might be able to do in that offense potentially. He's not as free as he was last year, but certainly somebody to keep an eye on. Also, a thing we like to keep an eye on here is your questions. So let's get to a little listener mailbag, a little bonus for everybody today. We've got one here from Steve_Sanders95 at Storyline1984. Strategy for a 10-team Superflex. Should I try to get 1 quarterback, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs in the first 5 rounds? Thanks. Ronis, we always get this. We kind of talked about this at the top of the show, right? 10 teams, a little bit different for Superflex. The supply and demand different, not a 2-quarterback league, just a 10-team Superflex. The dynamic changes quite a bit. When you're leaving the first 5 rounds, does that sound right to you that you want 1 quarterback, a couple wide receivers, a couple running backs, or are you not even putting yourself in that mindset of, I'm trying to leave the first 5 rounds with XYZ?
Yeah, I think, again, you got to play the board and see how it goes. If everyone is going to take quarterbacks really early on, then maybe you're going to get some value at the other positions. You just have to have your list of quarterbacks that you like. So 20 quarterbacks. Here's the thing. There are going to be teams that take their 3rd quarterback before teams have their 2nd. So you have to kind of read the room. But just have a list of quarterbacks like, hey, these are the 2 that I feel comfortable starting. You also have to remember, too, in a 10-team league, you're going to have so many options across the board. The waiver wire, unless your league, I advise in a 10-team league to start more players, an extra flex. But again, it depends on, is it a casual league, work? Every league is different, and sometimes we have to understand that. But I would still be flexible, and I'd just read the draft room. Like if you're picking 9 and 8 quarterbacks go, all right, I might take 1 there, and then take a couple value quarterbacks. The Lance, the Fields, knowing that you'll need a veteran, kind of like you did, Joe. I like that, like taking Lance and like, all right, now I'm gonna put in Carr for the first couple weeks. But I don't think you can have a set plan going in. Because people can surprise you. You have to read the draft room. And in a 10-team league, I'm willing to wait on quarterback a little bit more because I'm fine taking 2 in the 10 to 20 range. I don't have to get a top 8 one. And let's not forget, too, there's always going to be quarterbacks that come off the waiver wire. We sit here now and think like, oh, look at it's not going to happen. There's always someone. I mean, it was Jalen Hurts last year, right? He helped people win leagues. And maybe we thought there might be a chance, but he wasn't on many rosters. And even Justin Herbert, Superflex leagues, he was probably drafted. But We didn't
no expectation, please.
Right, we didn't know he was gonna. We didn't know a doctor was gonna stab Taylor. How could we foresee that?
If only Tyrod Taylor had foreseen it, might have been a different year. Let's take one from Barry Kaboom Conroy at Barry06. Barry wants to know, about to start a 14-team half-point PPR Superflex. He's got the 12th pick. Do you have any concerns if Saquon Barkley falls there to him in round 1 of going with Saquon? Saquon's been falling in drafts, Yates. How do you feel about in his Superflex? There's a real chance in a 12-team. It's not out of the question if Saquon's there. Would you go ahead and pull that trigger at 12?
Well, he said a 14-team league, right?
Right. So if it falls all the way to 12,
and he's at the 12 spot.
Yeah, it's possible. Not impossible.
In a 14-team league, I'm fine with that risk there. With Saquon at that spot, because I still think that we might not get him fully healthy for week 1 or 2. I might prefer him, at that turn, but again, depth dries up super quick in these larger leagues. I played in my first 14-team league last year, and I was just shocked. I was like, by round 4 or 5, I was like, where did all the running backs go? Because I have no one. And so to be able to get a running back there at that spot, and then maybe on your turn, come back and grab a quarterback that's still there. But again, it all depends on how the rest of the draft is going as far as that strategy. But Saquon specifically at the 12 spot, I'm not going to be scared off of that.
All right, last one we got here from FruityFly42. It says, at Yates, obviously right to you. You killed my brother. How dare you? I demand satisfaction or red seedless grapes. You decide tomorrow. So clearly the gauntlet's been thrown down there. That's right at you, Yates. How do you feel about that? Are you going to go to the store and get some red seedless grapes?
I'm just waiting for this podcast to end and then the fruit fly to show back up. Like, guaranteed. Like, I didn't kill it. I thought I did, but I think I did, but I didn't.
This guy on Twitter
it,
is confirming it. His brother is very close. But you got any favorite fruit, Ronis? You have a favorite fruit?
Mango. Mango is my fruit.
Look at you. You're so exotic and interesting.
Exactly.
That's why I always like talking to you. Adam Ronis, ladies and gentlemen. There was a lot of information in this podcast. Let me tell you. We did the mid-round values. We talked Superflex strategy at the top. We took some of your listener questions. Full service community. That's what we're about here at Fantasy Pros. And join our community at Discord. That's how you do it. Go to fantasypros.com/chat. We're going to do a ton of AMAs. We got a ton of channels in there. DFS channel, season-long stuff, trades. We're all in there. Yates, Tags, Dan Harris, myself. Everyone's in there answering questions. But there's also a lot of great fantasy minds, a lot of great fantasy players, part of our community too. I'm telling you, go join the chats over on Discord. Again, you can do that at fantasypros.com/chat. And don't forget, your drafts are coming up. So you got to go get the draft assistant with Sync. It syncs to all your leagues. It's like having us right there with you saying, no, don't do that. Do this instead. And telling you what's going to be there when it comes back to you, giving you insights, giving you confidence for all of your drafts. But you can only get it at fantasypros.com/draftwizard and get that MVP or Hall of Fame subscription when you do. And don't forget, Uncle Joey giving you something fun here for football season. Go to fantasypros.com/offers, $10 deposit, anywhere that we have our little friends like Underdog, FanDuel, DraftKings, any of those, and you get 6 free months of the Hall of Fame package. That's a $65 value for $10. What are you doing? Stop listening right now and go do that, please, for the love of God. Also, want to thank all the sponsors of today's show. We have great sponsors. Magic Spoon, obviously, fantastic stuff there. Delicious, good for you. How often can you say those two things? Go to magicspoon.com/fantasypros. Use that promo code as well. Don't forget, challenge yourself this year at Dynasty Owner. Dynasty Owner is the only fantasy platform where you can validate your intellect about fantasy football with a real NFL salary cap. DynastyOwner.com is the place to play. And the place for cool stuff is Pristine Auction. Go to pristineauction.com. That's PRISTINE auction.com. $5 on us because we're fun. I'm the fun uncle giving you all the free stuff. Now please go take it and go crush and dominate all your drafts. Ronis, it is always so great to hang out with you, to talk football, to see you in person, obviously, as well. Adam, please go tell everybody, again, what you got going on at Fantasy Alarm, at SiriusXM, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, Fantasy Alarm, working on the draft guide now. I have several articles there. My rankings are updated frequently, so just go to fantasyalarm.com. If you use the promo code RONIS, you get 50% off our season-long and DFS package. And you can catch me on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, midnight to 2 a.m. Eastern, Tuesday through Thursday, filling in at other times, and also Annie Up podcast with Howard Bender.
There you go. Follow him on the Twitter machine at Adam Ronis. Yates, have fun today at the fruit store. Make sure you load up there and you get all that going. It'll be nice too. Get some bananas for your magic spoon while you're at it. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Adam Ronis and Kyle Yates, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel.
Boom.
Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.